Part 3. The Weekend. Miles didn't sleep well. He wanted to call Tate and tell her he was sorry and he had a job. He tried her mobile phone on and off all the previous night, and it was the first thing he had done upon waking that morning. The mobile was still off. He wandered into his studio and flicked on the computer. It had no hard drive and booted up with a floppy disk. He walked into the kitchen and made a coffee. It was 8:30. He shook his head in disbelief. Back in the studio, he started to listen to the last piece of work he had started. Rubbish, he thought, and opened a new song file. He fiddled about for a while and tried Tate's mobile another half a dozen times before turning on the television. More bloody disasters, he said as he turned on to the news of 2 innocent victims being shot dead in the street somewhere in West Hollywood. He turned off the television and picked up the mail. 2.5 hours later, he was walking to work and his first shift. He saw another drinks can on his way in, but frowned and walked around it. James woke up brightly. He surveyed his new home and felt good. This was a new day, a new start, and life could only get better. He'd all but banished thoughts of Chrysalin as he strode out of the house and jogged towards the park. The sun was shining. Yes, coming to California was the right thing to do. He crossed the street and ran into the park. He ran around the park whilst thinking of where his excursion might take him later on that day. A cruise into town, something to eat, a walk around the mall. He needed some more furniture, and if he had time, he would join the health club. As he headed home from the park, he felt euphoric. He even started to think that his investigative job at Chevalier's might prove interesting. The answering machine was blinking upon his arrival home. He saw it and headed for the shower. He put on a robe and pressed the play button. "Hi, James. It's your mother. Can you call me when you get this message, please?" James checked the time. It was 11 a.m. He phoned his mother in Boston. "James, I'm so sorry." "What's wrong?" said James. "I don't know how to tell you this." "What?" replied James. "Chrysalin and Michael were hit by a drunk driver last night." His mother managed to get out tremulously. "Is she okay?" "Chrysalin died instantly, and Michael died this morning. We've just found out." There was a silence for several seconds. "James? James, are you still there? Speak, honey." "I'm here, Mother. Got to go. James put the phone down and sobbed. He called his mother back an hour later and told her he was fine. She knew he wasn't and said she'd be in touch when she had news about what arrangements had been made. Miles's shift at the bar was not one of life's memorable occasions. The bar was not exactly packed with people, and Pat spent most of the time upstairs. Miles wondered what was wrong upstairs. He also wondered how the bar survived. There had been 2 older men in all afternoon. They had played 2 games of pool and had 2 drinks. They had then played checkers for 3 hours without drinking anything. He checked the large station clock on the wall. It was 4:30, 3.5 hours to go. He tried calling Tate again, but to no avail. The trouble with not having much to do is that the mind wanders. Miles was no exception, and as time dragged on, he became increasingly consumed by his problems with Tate. Pat slipped into the bar at 6. He seemed a little more cheery than when Miles had arrived. "Could you do me a favour, son?" he asked Miles. "What would that be?" replied Miles. Pat explained that his wife had cancer, and that he'd looked after her, and the girl who was due to take over from Miles at 8 wasn't coming in. "Can you stay till close?" he asked. "Of course I can," said Miles. He didn't want to stay, but under the circumstances he said yes, with a smile. "I won't forget this, son." "Thanks, son. I know a good man when I meet one. I knew it when I met you." Miles instantly felt better about staying. He also felt a warmth for Pat that he hadn't thought Pat capable of. The bar remained empty till almost 9, when 8 men arrived. They asked after Pat. Miles told them that Pat was upstairs with his wife and wouldn't be down. The men insisted that Miles call Pat, and reluctantly Miles called him. Pat came down looking disgruntled. "Boys!" he exclaimed. "How are you, Pat? And how's Claire?" "I'm fine, and Claire's feeling a lot better." "That's great," they said, more or less in unison. Pat introduced Miles to the off-shift members of the LA police force. "They're all great guys," he beamed. Miles recognised one of the men as the officer who issued him with a ticket for littering the sidewalk. "Excuse me, you gave me this ticket for kicking a drink can on the sidewalk," he said, producing the ticket from his back pocket. The place erupted with laughter. Miles felt like an idiot. The man, Jerry, walked across to Miles, took the ticket and ripped it up. "Any friend of Pat's, as they say?" "Forget about it. You're now a friend of ours." There was a lot of backslapping and laughter before Pat announced that he had to go upstairs to be with Claire. By 10:30, only 2 off-duty officers remained. It was 10:45 when the drunken man virtually fell through the door. He wasn't your average drunk. This was a Saturday, and this man wore a casual suit, shirt with a collar and tie. Miles thought the man must be in the wrong bar. As the man stumbled across to the bar, he tossed his keys onto the oak countertop. Miles glanced to his right, where the 2 policemen were sitting some 20 or so feet away. They had noticed what was going on and were showing an interest. Miles palmed the keys and put them into his pocket. "Gin and tonic," drawled the drunkard. One of the policemen started to come across. Miles moved quickly towards him. "It's okay, he's a friend of mine. His name's Harry, and his wife's just left him," said Miles inexplicably. "Did I see some car keys?" asked the officer. "No, he threw me a couple of dollars. It's a kind of trick thing he does when he's drunk." Okay. Tell your friend to keep the noise down. We don't want to issue him with a ticket too, do we?" He laughed and walked back to his friend. Miles got the drunk a gin and tonic and made sure he was stable on the bar stool. 15 minutes later, the officers left. Miles felt he was living on a knife edge throughout that period. He let out a huge sigh of relief when they left. Miles had no idea why he did what he did for the stranger. Perhaps it was because they were a similar age. It could have been that the man looked like a fish out of water. Either way, Miles had stuck his neck out and got away with it. In any case, after the 2 off-duty police officers left, he didn't give his reasoning a moment's thought. "What's your name?" asked Miles. "James Howard Lindsay," replied the drunk. "Hi, I'm Marsden. Friends call me Mars." "Is that because you're a Martian?" said James. "No," laughed Mars. "It's because my dad was a nutter." They both laughed. Time rolled on and both men talked trivia, with James ordering gins with considerable regularity. "So what brought you here, and why are you celebrating?" asked Mars. "I got lost." "And then my girlfriend," said James. "Women," said Mars. "I knew mine since school days," said James dejectedly. "Wow, that's unbelievable." "And sad," said Mars. "Why did you break up?" "I don't know, really. We still loved each other. We just changed. We grew up, I suppose." "Then it died," James replied. "What died?" asked Mars. "She did, we did, love did." James fell off his stool and lay on the floor out cold. Miles gave up trying to revive James. He pulled out James's keys from his pocket, checked James for ID and found none. He looked outside the bar and saw the BMW, pressed the button on the key fob and the doors unlocked. He carried James to his car and locked up the bar, posting the keys under the door. Miles enjoyed driving the car. He'd always dreamt of owning something similar. He drove back home and carried James onto the sofa. James was very heavy, and Miles struggled to get him through the front door, but James didn't stir. Miles managed to lay him on his side using cushions, before raiding the fridge for his last 4 cans of beer. He drank 3 of them and went to bed. Tate wasn't sure why she decided to check on Miles. She missed him more than she wanted to acknowledge to herself. She thought he couldn't cope on his own. Her mother told her not to visit, and mothers know best. It was 8:30 a.m. when she drove by and the dark blue BMW was in her driveway. She was immediately suspicious. She opened the door quietly and came into the living room, where she saw James buried under a quilt and 4 cans of beer by the armchair. Typical. Nothing's changed, she thought. James stirred and awoke because of her closeness. Who are you? She cried out. Who are you? Said James. I'm the woman that used to live here, and now I don't. With that she turned and stormed out, leaving a rather bemused James rubbing his eyes. Miles came in 2 minutes after Tate had left. Did I hear you talking to someone, or was that my imagination? Yes, said James. She claims she was the woman who used to live here. Oh, my God, said Miles as he ran out into the street to see if Tate was close by. She wasn't. Shit, 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 Miles muttered under his breath. Miles was still cursing his misfortune as he re-emerged in the living room, where James was stretching out. If James had slept uncomfortably, he certainly didn't remember. In fact, he remembered only vague memories of his previous night's antics. He remembered Miles, and he remembered drinking. A lot. Everything else was a blur. He couldn't remember ever having been so drunk or hungover, truth be known. It never happened before. Did I do anything bad last night? He asked Miles. Not really. You missed losing your driving licence by a whisker, fell off your bar stool and generally acted like a drunk. That's all, replied Miles. That's all? James replied incredulously. The 2 men reacquainted themselves, Miles making the most of James' lack of self-control and poking fun at every opportunity. It would seem that I owe you big time, said James. No, not really. I think I did the right thing, replied Miles. James gulped down several glasses of water during a tour of Miles's studio. They talked about their lives and a new friendship was born. 2 men, so different, but an easy understanding of each other. They agreed to keep in touch, exchanged phone numbers, and James left. He slept on and off for the remainder of the day, his thoughts of Crystalline drifting in and out of his mind. Miles was feeling happier. He really felt that he'd helped out a new friend, and the fact that Tate had come back, albeit briefly, made him feel confident that she wouldn't be away too long. He tried to call her and left another message on her mobile answering service, where he attempted to mitigate James's presence on their couch. He made a coffee and walked into his studio. He had an idea, and he was intent on making it work. Miles hardly noticed the time. The garage didn't have a clock, and he almost forgot that he was due into Riley's bar at 4. He was taking a break in the kitchen when he noticed the time. It was 10 minutes before 4. Bollocks, he muttered. It would take him at least 15 minutes to walk it. Miles caught a glimpse of his old BSA motorbike leaning against the outside of his garage as he headed off towards town. For a moment he wished the bike still worked and vowed that he'd try to do something about it later that week. He broke into a jog. 200 yards later he began walking, panting and holding his sides. He vowed to get fitter. Or get the bloody bike working. Miles was 2 minutes late when he arrived. He was out of breath, but Pat didn't notice either the time or Miles's distress. Pat was flustered. Claire had been very unwell, and he was waiting for an ambulance to transport her to the hospital. I would have phoned you, son, but everything's upside down, he said, referring to the turmoil in his mind. No problem, if I can help in any way, said Miles. Thanks, said Pat, as he scanned the road for an ambulance. The ambulance arrived, and Claire was taken to the hospital accompanied by her doting husband. Miles busied himself around the bar. He wondered what he could do in the event that Pat closed the bar. He tried phoning Tate, but got an answering service. He smiled to himself as he thought of James and his narrow escape with the law. Time drifted, very slowly, as the usual inhabitants of the bar came and went. At 10, Pat phoned to say he wouldn't be back that night. He told Miles where the spare keys were kept and asked him to lock up at 11 and open again at 12 on Monday. As Miles wiped the tables and tidied up, he couldn't help but feel that the bar would soon close through lack of business in any case. His mind began to focus on what could be done to resurrect the business. He understood what Pat had originally planned, but the whole concept of an old-world drinking men's establishment was alien to Miles. He was still thinking about the bar when he finally arrived home. It was midnight. Miles made straight for his studio, where he recalled his work earlier in the day. He smiled. On the right track, he thought. He drank the last can of beer in the house and ambled to bed. He would get on with the song tomorrow. His head had barely touched the pillow, and he was asleep.